This is Kurt Molly here again with a good friend of mine, Mr. Jon Morrow over here. So I'm going to brag about Jon here for just a couple of minutes because I've known Jon for a couple of years, and every time he enters a room, everyone goes very, very quiet. He enters in and then he starts talking, and you'll see why in here just a little bit. I think a couple of big ahas for me is there's a mutual friend, Danny Inney. Jon came out to an event with Danny Inney, and Jon started talking about copy blogging, and I was just blown away. Now, you'll hear Jon's story here in just a little bit if you haven't already, and you'll be able to see this here in just a little bit as well too when Jon comes on camera. Jon's an amazing, amazing personality, has this huge brain that's brilliant. But here's one of the things that I absolutely respect about him. So one of my family members is also in a wheelchair. One of my family members tries to figure out how to navigate life. And one of the things that I really respect about Jon is as he was getting started in this, there comes to be a situation where when you're in a situation, you're in a chair and you get some assistance, either you make so much money and the government takes that money, or you try to kind of figure it out on yourself. And it's really hard to figure it out on yourself. What Jon decided to do is, well, let's just move to Mexico. We'll figure this out on myself. Jon's been able to take care of his family. He's built an amazing business. He left Coffee Blogger in 2009. So I want to take this in perspective. 11 years ago, he left this place that he used to work at, and he still has some of the highest blogs that are read, has the most links, the most shares. And speaking of the most links and shares, I saw Jon speak at one of the internet marketing parties. You guys have heard me talk a lot about the internet marketing party here. And he talks about a very specific way on how you can get people to share your content ethically, morally, how to get people emotionally involved. But as I kind of wrap up this whole intro, I think probably the one thing, Jon, this just hit me the most is we were sitting in a mastermind. It was another Danny Inney event. And I asked you a question of how do you write copy? And I know that you don't blog every single day, and it's very rare that you'll write a long article and you think about, this is what you told me, the first word, the second word, how the first and second word are going to relate to the third word, how the third word does relate back to the other two. And that's how sentences are formed, to entire paragraphs, very meticulously. And sir, I just want to pick your brain, and I just want to say thank you again for being here. So, I just want to kind of jump right in. Jon, thank you so much for being here, sir. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jon, one of the things you talk about is blogging and content, but you said this right in our pre-interview. There's a big shift going on for blogging. It used to be everyone can jump in and start blogging. You've been doing this a very long time, sir. So actually, before I get into my question about blogging, could you please tell everybody how long you've been doing this thing online?
You know, it's going to make me feel old. It's probably about 15, 16 years now, something like that.
So before I get in the blog, because this is very important, you've seen the .com bust, you've seen the real estate crash, you've had some other kind of interesting, everyone goes through business.
Yeah.
So would you mind kind of going through that in a minute? Because everyone in 2020, this is a crazy time. Do you mind, were you involved online when the .com bust happened?
I was trying to run my first software company. In the .com boom, I was creating language learning software for the military. Had VC funding, and it still crashed and burned because our VC went under. And yeah, I mean, that was my first big, hello, you're in the real world now. Where
and then what was your pivot from there?
Depression. For a few months, I mean, I was a young guy. I think I was like, how old am I now? Anyway, like 20 years old. And that was like the first big failure in my life. And I took it really hard. And I ended up going back to school and finishing my degree, which wasn't a terrible choice. And
what was your degree in again?
So before I started my software company, it was in computer science. After I left, I came back and switched to English literature, which everyone told me was a terrible idea because writers don't make any money. And here I am, and I do okay.
You do very well, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So yeah,
So go ahead.
It was a big pivot. And then, I mean, it happened to get in the real estate crash. My father is a real estate developer.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I helped him raise $40 million of private funding for his deals before the
Before
real
the
estate
crash.
crash. And then the real estate market crashed. My father lost $50 million. I lost about $3 million. Totally cleaned us out. And that's when I started writing. Literally, I had a crappy little apartment because my condo got foreclosed on. And I was sitting in my crappy little apartment and I started writing about what I learned about how to make money. And 60 days later, it was nominated for a Webby Award for the best personal finance blog in the world.
Really?
Yeah. So that's when I started really writing and taking it seriously. I'd always wanted to do it, but felt like there was no money to be made in it. But when I stumbled into blogging after the real estate crash, I just felt like it was like putting on a glove.
So just to be clear, where you get that accolade, were you writing like a blog a day? Was this 4 or 5 blog articles that got you? How did those accolades
I think
happen?
I was doing like 2 or 3 articles a day.
Wow.
But so specifically, the award I got nominated for was the best new personal finance blog of the year for whatever year that was, 2000.
Wow.
I don't know, 18, 17. But or no, 2008, 2007, whatever year it was. And I was writing maybe 3 articles a week, something like that. And it got like 60,000 visitors in the first 60 days. Which nowadays, I mean, I've done way better, but for a beginner just starting out, that was pretty incredible, and I knew I was on to something.
Wow. So then where did Copyblogger come in then? You start writing, you said it fits like a glove. Do you start looking for other jobs at that point because you want to improve your copy skill? What do you do with your copy skill?
So it fits like a glove. I get nominated for this Webby Award, but I'm making no money doing it. And I see that it's going to be a long game to really build it into something that makes a lot of money. And I got an offer from someone to buy the blog for 10 grand when I got nominated for the award. A guy came to me and said, I'll give you 10 grand for it. And at the same time, Brian Clark from Copyblogger, which was the biggest, most influential marketing blog at the time, reached out to me and said, hey, how'd you like to become an editor? Because I'd written for him a couple of times for free of charge. And I took him up on that. And he is really the guy that really gave me my sort of formal education on blogging, on copywriting, and taught me a ton. Kind of made me into who I am.
So I have a question for you on that. So right now in 2020, the economy's interesting depending on when people are watching the recording. Some people can dive into deeper information like this. They can go get a formal education. Sometimes people have a problem of saying, hey, I want to go get a job to learn from someone. Like if you're a world-renowned copywriter that has really refound their skills, what kind of advice do you have for people that are diving into copy? Should they look for a job and work for somebody with a mentor? They dive in a bunch of content? I mean, you've done very well in this path.
This is one thing I disagree with a lot of copywriting teachers about. I think earlier in your career, it's better, and especially if we're going through a recession, don't be entitled. Don't be entitled. I think earlier in your career, you should seek out the smartest mentors you can find and do whatever it takes just to be in the room. So, I mean, just so you know, I mean, like when Brian hired me for Copyblogger, I don't remember what I made. it was like something ridiculous, 30,000 a year. And I was working like 80 hours a week.
Mm.
And also, at one point, I got hired by Neil Patel to help him launch his
Oh, that's
Kissmetrics
right.
blog. Okay. This was after I'd built up some reputation at Copyblogger, and Neil didn't offer me a lot of money. I think it was something like $2,000 a month for 3 blog posts a week to manage all of the writers. It was nothing.
Wow.
But because it was Neil Patel, I said yes. Now I have endorsements from Neil Patel and Brian Clark. I mean, this is early in my career. I've been blogging for like a year at this point, and I had
Oh, wow.
endorsements from 2 of the biggest names in the world. And each of them saying working with Jon is one of the smartest things I've ever done. And that multiplied my rates when I went to charge other people. I went, after I started work for Neil, I went up for freelancing to $5,000 per post. That's more than any writer, any other columnist. Paul Krugman at the New York Times doesn't make $5,000 per post. Okay. So I was getting paid $5,000 a post. I had consulting gigs. I had a waiting list like 6 months long. So earlier in your career, I think what you need to be thinking about is, number one, how can I learn to really know what I'm doing? And number two, how can I accumulate proof that I know what I'm doing? If you can pull those 2 things together, your career will take off like a rocket. So accepting those poor rates, it's made me millions over the long term.
So let's talk about this just for a minute. This is a very, very interesting question. A lot of people have different beliefs. So let's just say someone starts to learn copy and they want to offer it as a service and they want to start working for small businesses. Do they charge just a little bit? Do they work for free until they get known? You know, a lot of people, they take a lot of free accounts and they think someday it's going to be worth a lot of money and they kind of spin their wheels. What's your thought process on that?
I would never go to a small business and volunteer to work for free. Because a small business, unless they become the next billion-dollar unicorn, is not valuable proof. Now, on the other hand,
I love you.
If a company that, let's say a startup, that is like on the cover of Forbes or something as the next billion-dollar unicorn, they ask you to work for free, do it. Do it. Because that'll be worth a fortune over your lifetime. So what I'd suggest, I mean, if you're going to write for small businesses, which are for the most part unsophisticated clients, just telling it how it is, they're not marketing experts. They're not going to have a huge reputation, a huge brand. I would definitely charge. There's nothing wrong with that kind of work. I worked with small businesses and charged, and that's how I paid my bills. But when it came to celebrities and huge brands, I would start thinking about who's like the biggest, most legendary client you can imagine. Whoever that is, do whatever it takes to get in the door. And if you can get any sort of writing job, and by the way, I've done this for other writers who have since written for me. I've probably had over 1,000 different writers work for me, and the ones who are really good, I gave them glowing endorsements, connections, everything they could possibly ask for to launch their career, and I did it joyfully because I wanted to see them succeed. So be really, really good at what you do, and then go surround yourself with really influential people. If you want your career to take off like a rocket, that's how you do it.
Okay, so you've actually helped people do this. And this is a good segue and not a pitch, but you've actually helped people do this. Small blogger, and you have a content creator program that you have. Mm-hmm. Now, here's the deal. This is I want to interview you for your brain, but also for what you've put together over here. that there are a lot of people right now sitting down wondering, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Some people want to offer additional services with their business if they have that. You're talking about copy and content and content creators. Do you mind talk about what you've put together and how you can help people? And I'll give them a link here in a second before I start asking you a bunch of other questions.
The way we started teaching content marketing is that I kept getting asked for writers. Like CEOs would reach out to me and say, John, do you got anybody I can hire? And I was like, no. I didn't really have anyone I really trusted, or not many people I really trusted. So it eventually occurred to me, why don't I put together a certification program? I'll build the writer that I feel like all of these people need, and then I'll hire them. I'll pass on the leads. So I started up this program, and immediately it's taken off like a rocket. So what we do is, it's a content marketing certification where we teach you not only how to write really great content, but we teach you how to write the type of content that ranks on Google. So we really go deep into SEO and also into analyzing your competition. And because of that, and because of the way we test people, so our graduates, not only do they have to pass a multiple choice exam, they have to fill out content briefs saying how they would write an article in different competitive situations. They also have to write an actual 3,000-word article that one of our editors, who's also edited for Forbes, Huffington Post, Business Insider, one of the top editors in the world, he has to give you the stamp of approval. Okay? So after you get by all of these hurdles, then we make you a graduate. We give you the endorsement of Smart Blogger, which is the biggest writing site.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And anytime a company reaches out to me for leads, we pass on those leads to our graduates. So in general, we send out 2 leads a week, something like that, to our graduates. And they get all of that, and we don't charge them anything.
So for an opportunity, so by the way, I'll put a link here on the screen if you're watching this, which will be the belt.live/John M. It'll take you to show you all this information. Who's a good copywriter? So people, again, are looking for change. Someone who's creative, someone who's dedicated, any kind of personality traits that you have that maybe people can kind of align their personality traits to think about getting into copy?
One of the things I like to talk about is the different levels of writing sophistication. At the base level, you have people who can write a sentence and it's convey a message clearly. So that's like level 1, is just being able to write clearly and correctly for the most part. Your grammar is good, your spelling is good, all of that. That's level 1, okay? If you're below level 1, and by the way, 60-70% of the world cannot, I read what they say, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Because they really can't get their ideas across. And in my opinion, if you're in that camp, you shouldn't be writing, okay? Just end the story, give up the whole writing career. On the other hand, if you can write clearly, it could be worth looking into. Level 2 is where you really start to understand structure. So that's things like headlines, subheads, bullet points, openings, closings, how all of those different components come together in any kind of copy that you're producing. Most people never get there, but a small group of people do. And that's where you can definitely start to get paid to write. And if you work with the right clients, it can pay pretty well. Our graduates are making usually at least $200 for their very first post that they write. So, that's not bad for a total beginner. And then we try to get them up to $500 or more an article within 6 months to a year. So level 2 is kind of where you need to be to start. Level 3 is where you start understanding different structures of content. So, for example, people have probably heard of like list posts, 7 ways to do X, 7 ways to burn your belly fat or whatever, right? Then there are how-to articles. There are actually about a dozen of those content frameworks, and they all have slightly different structures. And understanding the differences and when to use those, that's level 3. There are very few writers in the world. I'd say it's less than the top 1% that know how to do that. And then level 4 is where you can write things that have such an emotional impact that people remember it forever. And they instantly fall in love with you after reading one article. There are maybe 50 to 100 writers in the world who reach that level. And we help writers get to level 2 in our base program and get their first paying client.
That is amazing. So again, I'll put a link on the screen. It'll be thebelt.live/Jon M. You'll see here in just a minute. I want to talk about level 4 for a minute, just because it's very, very small. You made the mention in a mastermind when we were talking about, I don't remember if someone asked you if you could be hired to write a blog, but you said something like this. I'm going to paraphrase, and I'd like you to dive in more. The blogs of the future, to be ranked on the first page of Google, and a good blog will cost over $1 million.
Yeah.
Right? Wrong? Would you mind diving into that for just a minute?
It's already happening. So let's say one of the most competitive terms in the world, content marketing. All right. You cannot rank for this term without spending at least $1 million. Even to be on the first page, it might cost you $1 million. Okay. But to get to number 1, you have to beat out Neil Patel, which is the top SEO in the world. And Neil is not going to let that go easily. Okay? The thing to realize about Google and ranking content is it's a competitive sport. So you're not playing alone. You are competing against everyone else who wants to rank for that keyword. And the best person wins. And usually the person with the biggest team wins. If a company comes in and has 20 people working on an article, or on ranking an article, which by the way happens for big terms like content marketing, Neil isn't working with himself. He has a whole agency of people that work on that stuff. Okay. You cannot compete. So that's one of the reasons why the whole content world is shifting right now away from individuals and more toward teams. And it's not something unique. It shouldn't even be a surprise, because it also happened with TV, with podcasts. I mean, look at, 5 years ago, a lot of podcasts were just one-man shows.
Single people. I was just thinking that, yeah.
Right, to some extent, if some of them still are, but all of the big podcasts these days have a team of 2, 3, 4, 5 people, and that number keeps going up. It's something called the maturation of media. We see it with every type of media. And so it's happening with content too. And that just reinforces it's about surrounding yourself with really smart people. Being a part of those winning teams is priceless when it comes to learning and also making a lot of money.
So good. Again, this is one of the reasons I wanted to do the summit, which is surround just a bunch of brilliant people where just 1 or 2 ideas from these conversations. This is really, really great. So, Jon, 2020, a little crazy. Again, here in Austin, which we're both kind of in the same vicinity, downtown, they have stuff that is boarded up. We don't know what's going to happen for the next 3 to 6 months. Yeah. So there are people that are sitting here right now that are either, I say this almost every interview, kind of like, who moved my cheese? Hey, this is always going to be the same. I'm just going to watch Netflix for the next couple of weeks and just take time off. Some people are hunkering down. They're really busy. I'm enjoying a ton of these interviews. 1, what are you doing? And 2, what are you recommending to writers right now when they have this downtime?
So the thing that I'm most concerned about right now is the economic downturn.
Absolutely.
I mean, coronavirus in itself is very scary. I'm one of the people that's potentially most at risk from that disease. But there's also not a lot I can do about it short of staying inside,
Yeah.
right? I wish there was, but there's not. So I don't think about that too much. What I do think about is what I can control, which is my own finances and also the finances of my company. So I'm spending a lot of time right now looking at data, what's selling, what's not selling. For instance, like we've seen an explosion in sales of our lower end products, in one case triple what we expected to earn, and a severe decline in sales of high-end $5,000 and up products as people start to save. And I think for those $5,000 plus products, you're really going to have to justify your value even more than you ever have in order to get that big sale. So that means I'm reshuffling marketing calendars, less dependency on high-end offers, more about the lower-end offers, more about nurturing the list, more about lead generation, less about maximizing profit. And I'm also lining up contingency revenue plans. I mean, thankfully, my company is very healthy. We have a very healthy reserve. We have very healthy revenue. But I'm one of those people that thinks about, what if things go wrong? What if we're still here in 3 months, 6 months, a year? What does that look like? And how do we need to prepare for those things? I hope we're not. I hope it turns around. But a lot of the evidence so far, like if you look at the number of people who have filed for unemployment, is pointing to a very bad economic outcome. And that means I'm trying to prepare for that outcome, not in a panicked sort of way, but in a, I'm one of those people that looks at data and I try to figure out what's most likely going to happen and how can I be prepared for all of the possible outcomes. And then I distribute that throughout my team. So we've changed our quarterly objectives. We've changed our annual objectives. Like I used to have a huge profit goal for our company for the year. Now our goal is changing to no one gets laid off, not a single person. We're going to keep going through this and everyone is going to keep their jobs. So just changing the messaging, shifting everything. And what's difficult about it is all of this has happened in just a few weeks, right? We went from nothing to this huge change. And so it's like whiplash. So I'm spending most of my time preparing myself and also preparing our company and our 13 employees to be ready for this.
So before we dive into everybody else, I want to dive into something that you said here that was really interesting, and thank you for that insight. So the things start to change. People kind of sit there, like I said, who move my cheese, they can just completely ignore the change, or they start to embrace the change. You said something about contingency plan. A lot of people talk about refining their business, which you did, but you also said looking at another business as well too. So sometimes, you know, people are like, I got to go down with the ship. Not saying that your company is going to go down whatsoever, but it sounds like you start to diversify in businesses that you're running too when times like this happen. Is that right? Do you mind talking about that for a minute?
I mean, we certainly can. And it's things like, I mean, so some of the thoughts that have gone through my mind. I have an agent that's been waiting 7 years for me to accept a book deal. And I've been saying no for 7 years. And publishers are willing to offer me a ton of money for a book deal.
So I'm curious, how come you've never done a book before? You have an amazing story. You're an amazing writer. Lots of people know you for writing. What?
I just haven't wanted to write the book.
Okay, that's fair.
Felt like I felt like I always had something more important to do. Right or wrong, that's just the way I felt. And also, if I have to be really honest, I think the idea of sharing my full personal story, every time I do it in the blog post, it's scary to me. And I think the idea of dedicating a whole book to it is kind of scary too. So I think I've been avoiding it a little bit because of that. Not that I'm afraid of any of my story, but it's such an intense level of, I write with a lot of vulnerability. I try to put my soul into it. And so that sort of a process is not easy for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. Our previous guest that I just talked to right before I talked to you, her name is Rhonda Britton. She's an expert on fear. She's been on Oprah, Sally Jesse Raphael, and at 13 years old or 14 years old, she saw her father murder her mother and then kill himself right in front of her. And she's like, for years, I would tell my story, and other people, like she goes, I felt ashamed. Other people would judge me. And when it really came down to, we were just talking about it, is how other people ended up feeling about her story, where she's like, man, as soon as I tell it, I just feel weird about telling it because I go really deep, but it's actually how other people's reaction of how they end up handling it. And she's just done amazing things, obviously. I mean, you have as well too. And it's just interesting to where people really start to learn that story and you become more of a real person and just help a ton of people. Like I for one can't wait to read that book. So
It would. It would. There have been a ton of very smart people that have told me you have to do this, and I've been procrastinating for 7 years now. So
yeah,
there you go.
Now's a good time to do it. All right, so let's go to someone who doesn't think that they have any skills. You know, one of the stories that I really relate to you with is, again, you figuring out your own finances. Am I going to be, taking care of the government? Am I going to figure out my own stuff? So there are a lot of people now thinking, well, what can I do? What can I do different? What would you give some encouraging words to maybe someone starting out thinking about doing something different?
So here's a few things to think about, and I'm going to start with something that's maybe a little discouraging and end with something that's a little more encouraging. Okay. The discouraging thing is that in any sort of recession, it's the people without valued skills that are disproportionately punished in the economy.
Yes.
So if you don't have anything that's extremely valuable to offer people in a recession, you'll often have a very difficult time finding work. And a good example of this is in a great economy, even if you're a stay-at-home mom, and that's all you've ever done, which I'm not criticizing stay-at-home moms, but you want to go make some money, you can probably get a job as a personal assistant, maybe even administrative assistant, right? Because those types of jobs don't require much experience. But in a recession, it goes the other way. It's the very experienced executive assistants and things that are getting the work, and the people without the skills are the ones that are suffering. Same thing for writers and marketers. If you don't have those skills, you're going to suffer. So I think the questions on your mind should be, number one, what skills do I want to acquire that will be most valued by companies during a recession? Okay. Number two, I think you ought to be asking yourself, how long is that going to take to reasonably acquire those skills? And number three would be, how do I financially prepare myself to be able to take that long to develop the skills and start getting work? So the answer is, on a lot of things, so let's take the belt method, for example. Someone, if they were really committed, I've seen your course, they could go through that in, if they really, 8-10 hours a day, 30 days, they could go through it and know most of the concepts, really push through. Same thing with my content marketing course. You could do it in 30 days. Most people don't, but some people do. So the first thing I do is commit yourself to getting top quality training in a particular skill set as fast as possible. And then go through it with focus, like it's your job to study. Okay?
That's good.
After that, then start looking for work. And I'd say, even if you're in a highly skilled job, and I already know that people are still going to be spending money on ads on Facebook. People are still going to be hiring writers, but it's going to be the people who are really skilled who are getting the work. Okay. And what that means is, I would say, give yourself at least 60 days, if not 90 days, to start getting paid work. Okay. And it's probably not going to be, in the beginning, great paid work. It's just going to be enough to help you get by. So with that being said, I mean, I would look at a number that's something like, how do I survive for 4 to 6 months of no income in order to put myself on solid financial footing? That may mean moving in with a family member. It may mean selling some things. It's probably going to mean making some sacrifices. I've been there before. I was there back in when I started my first blog. Okay. And it sucks. But on the other hand, when we come out of the recession, all of a sudden you were an extremely skilled person who now has a track record during the recession. So when we came out of the recession that we were in with the real estate recession, I was already a millionaire. I went from being totally broke to being a millionaire during the duration of that recession. And it was because of the work I did during the recession. So the opportunities are enormous. And even though it may be tough in the beginning, it can totally pay off.
It just, and I really appreciate that. Like, I always tell people, like, you got to look at this in perspective. So many people go for 4 years or 5 years in school, and they do everything that you just talked about, like living with the parents, scrap by, or like what I saw in my personal story, 2007, 2008. A lot of people went back to school to get an education, to make sure they had a better job next time, where some of the loans were promised to be forgiven. 10 years later, only 10% of those loans are forgiven. And I'm thinking, man, you signed up for a 10-year plan. You signed up for a 4-year plan and then a 10-year plan. We're talking about 30, 60, 90 days that you may have to, I mean, kind of figure some stuff out. What you just said was a great plan. Figure out 6 months how you can study, kind of get by as you're getting a job. We're equivalently talking about a semester where most people will spend 4 or 5 years. We're just talking about, like, I'm not saying it's easy, but with the right skills, what you've said over and over, surround yourself with the right people, can really start to take off as a rocket ship. Like, there's a lot of opportunities. So, John, kind of to wrap this up, I don't want to go over in your time. I want to be sensitive to your time. What is your kind of vision for the future? You look at trends. Where do you think writing is going to go as this recession kind of drops? There's physical products that aren't able to ship because of the constraints, but there are a lot of programs that are really taking off right now.
Yeah.
What do you see for writing over the next year?
So here's what I think you need to look at, and here's what I'm researching right now, so that I can give our students guidance on this. What's going to happen with the writing work is you're going to see a lower amount of writing work from unsophisticated small businesses. So in the past, when we were in a boom economy, there were businesses who were hiring writers, and they didn't even really know why. They just knew they were supposed to have content. So they were like, all right, I guess I'll hire a writer to do some content, right? Those businesses are probably going to suffer big time, okay? What is not going to change is businesses with sophisticated marketing teams are probably going to continue to do really well in most industries. So look for sophisticated teams. If they don't have like an editor-in-chief, if they don't have a SEO specialist or an SEO strategist, some of these really skilled positions on board, I would be very wary of those companies. The other thing is some industries boom in a down economy and some decline. So just for example, like credit card industry, it's going to be booming.
Yeah.
So writing articles about credit cards, personal finance, how to save money, that's going to be booming. Arts and crafts take off during recessions. So all of your arts and crafts sites are going to be booming. And there are a lot more. So being tuned into what industries are making money, and then inside those industries, finding the most sophisticated teams you can, that's going to be where to find the best paid work.
That is golden. That's really, really good. So one more time, I'll put a link up here on the screen, which will be the belt.live/John M to get more information with the content. John, I could spend all night talking to you, but again, I want to be sensitive to your time. Any parting words that you want to give? Again, I want to run this for all of 2020, and every time that you talk, I learn something. So any parting words that you'd like to give people as the economy is changing?
The only thing I'll say, and hopefully you've seen this and just what I said. Take a data-driven logical approach to this rather than letting your emotions guide you. I've been through a lot of crises. I've had pneumonia. By the way, this is a viral pneumonia. I've had pneumonia 16 times in my life.
And any pneumonia can actually kill you, correct?
Any pneumonia can actually kill you. I've had it 16 times. I've survived 16 times. One of the reasons why I'm still alive is I don't panic. So try not to panic. Try to come up with a logical, rational plan to get from where you are to where you want to be. And, invest. If you don't have the skills, invest in programs like Kurt's, like mine, like other people in the series. I mean, one of the things we do, even before this started, that made our program stand out, is we actually guarantee all of our graduates get their first client within 60 days, or we give them a refund, which is an insane refund. But we've had 97 graduates, we've given one refund. And I'm skeptical of that one person. I'm not even sure they really tried that hard. So, look for programs that have a track record where people going through them are making money and where they have proof, testimonials. And you could be on your way to a great future during the recession that's coming up and also after that for years to come.
Sir, I have one last personal question because it just honestly amazes me every time that I hear you talk. You have I didn't get into this, but this is there's great stories. You have an amazing dating life story. You have lots of great stories, but you're calm. You're so incredibly calm through crisis, through other times that I've known you. Is there anything like, do you meditate? Do you sit and pontificate for hours? You're a very calm, methodical, well thought out person. I'm just kind of curious where that comes from.
Comes from a few places. I do meditate. I also journal. I've also been through a great deal of trauma therapy because I've been through an enormous, almost indescribable amount of trauma in my life. All of those things help a great deal, and I'd recommend them to anyone. Every person on earth should have those three skills in their toolbox. The other side of it is almost dying and also living with the ever-present possibility of your own death tends to put things in perspective. The reason why I'm never scared and I never panic, actually it's not true, I am scared sometimes, but I never panic, is because I've already done all of the most important things I wanted to do in this life, and I'm the person that I always wanted to be. And because of that, if I go out at any given time, all right, peace. My own death doesn't scare me. And because I've already been through so many horrible things, the idea of just another little recession coming, it honestly, is it going to suck? Yeah, it's going to suck. But I've dealt with things 100 times harder. Yeah.
Isn't it true you are the oldest living person with your condition?
I'm one of the oldest, in the top 10. Yeah. And I'm certainly, actually what I've been told, so I was on Medicaid to pay all of my medical bills. I built my own business. I became a multimillionaire. I'm the only person in U.S. history, possibly, to get with a severe disability, to get off of Medicaid, the particular Medicaid disability program I was on, and to become a multimillionaire with a severe disability. So it's possible I've done something that literally no one has ever done before.
Lots of things, sir.
And so part of that is because of technology. I'm living in a perfect time. If I lived before the internet, I'd probably be dead, right? Because what am I going to do? But I'm very grateful for the time we live in. And I'm not all that frightened because once you've been through terrible things, what we're going through now is terrible, but I've been through worse, honestly. And I can say that and it actually be true. So yeah.
I cannot tell you how much I appreciate this. Thank you, sir. I love you. I appreciate you. You're a brilliant individual. You help lots of people in this world. And I just thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Have a great night. Thank you, John. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.